Right, off we go. Chapter 9 was a pretty scary chapter for Torak. Now on to chapter 10. Torak has killed the boar. Let's see what happens. Torak wrapped the slab of boar's liver in burdock leaves and tucked it into the fork of an oak tree. "My thanks to the clan guardian for this meat," he muttered, as he'd done countless times before. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel thankful. All he could think about was the wise old boar snuffling in the leaf mould and keeping him company for the night. The fat, fluffy piglets who had lost their father. He limped back to the carcass. It was enormous. After a struggle, he'd managed to roll it over and slit the belly to get at the innards, but that was as far as he'd got. Until now, the biggest prey he'd ever killed had been a roebuck, and that had taken 2 exhausting days to deal with. The boar was many times bigger. It would take him a whole half moon. He didn't have a whole half moon. He had to reach the deep forest and find the cure. But he had no choice. It was the oldest law of all that when you made a kill, you had to treat the prey with respect and use every part of it. That was the pact which had been made long ago between the clans and the world spirit. Torak had to honour it or risk untold bad luck. He also had to tend to the wound in his calf. It was burning. Not even the rain cooled it down. By the stream he found a clump of soapwort. Mashing some of the wet leaves to make a slippery froth, he washed his leg. The pain was so bad that it made his eyes water. Now to sew up the wound. He found some bone needles in his pack, which hung unharmed on the holly tree, and chose the thinnest, and a length of deer sinew thread. The thread he'd made from the roebuck had been lumpy and thick, and when Vedna had seen it, she'd pursed her lips and given him some of hers. It was as fine as spider's gossamer, and he thanked her under his breath. The first stab of the needle was agonizing. Drawing the thread through his skin made him moan, and he had to hop in circles with the needle sticking out of his calf before he could work up the courage to make another stitch. When he'd finished, tears were streaming down his face. Ouch. Next, the dressing. He used some chewed green willow bark, at least there was plenty of that, although dabbing it on stung like fury. Then a soft pad peeled from the inside of a horsehoof mushroom, with a birch bast binding to keep everything in place. When it was over, he was trembling. The wound was still throbbing, but the pain had lessened a little. He found his boots, muddy but undamaged, and pulled them on. He was glad they were summer ones, with a rawhide sole and soft buckskin sides which wouldn't chafe his calf. Lastly, he stowed the rest of the horsehoof mushroom in his pack for changing the dressing in a few days. A few days. He would still be here working on the carcass if the follower didn't get him first. The rain had stopped. Water dripped off the ruined willow and glistened on the carcass of the boar. A pair of ravens flew down, eyeing it hopefully. Torak shooed them away. Black spots darted before his eyes, and he realised he was faint with hunger. Butchering the carcass would have to wait. He had to eat. He'd finished the supplies he'd taken from the ravens, but with the carcass he had no shortage of meat. He'd never felt less like eating. Watched by the ravens, he forced down the rest of the liver. Drinking the blood was harder. Most of it had drained into the mud, a mistake he couldn't now repair, and which, being against the pact, would bring him bad luck. To make amends, he took his birchwood cup from his pack and scooped up what remained in the body cavity. He tried not to think about Oslak whittling the cup for him one long winter's night, or that he was drinking the blood of a friend. Yikes. To take away the taste, he crunched up some young burdock stems. Then, at last, he made a start on the carcass. Skinning it was back-straining, arm-wrenching work, and it was nearly dusk by the time he'd finished. He was covered in blood and shaking with tiredness, and the hide was a muddy, stinking mess. He still hadn't washed it, or started scraping off the flesh and fat. After that, There would be days spent curing it with wood ash and mashed brains, and drying the meat, and splitting the bones for fish hooks and arrowheads. Not forgetting, of course, that he still had to build a shelter and a fire before it got dark. "Wishing won't get it done," said a voice behind him. Torak gave a start. He couldn't see anyone. The bracken was man-high, filled with shadow. "Who are you?" he said. He took a step forward, then realised he'd left his weapons by the carcass. That was when he saw it. A face in the bracken, staring at him. A face of leaves. No idea who that's going to be. We'll have to wait till chapter 11. Bye-bye.